I predict that America will become a Muslim country. I wholeheartedly believe this. It won't become a Muslim country because of people immigrating there who are already Muslims. It will become a Muslim country by the vast majority of people just waking up, just like I did.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode on TMJ's Political Current podcast. Islam in America is often viewed and spoken about as incompatible with Western civilization. And some even go further. They say it's not even just about incompatibility, it's about being an outright threat to the very social fabric of America. And this is a conversation that happens all the time across the political spectrum. But one aspect to the conversation that I think we're not speaking about enough is American values, Western civilization, the American way of life, these terms that are thrown around. And many don't question and say, okay, but what are these really? Is being an American being a white Christian? And what even are Christian values? Are Christian values American values? Are liberal Christians following American values or conservative Christians? Lots of questions that many of us have stopped asking because they just are never considered to be relevant, but they are. And today I'm speaking to a guest who has both of these identities in one, both being a Muslim and a white American. I'm speaking today with Canyon Mims from a small town in Idaho who converted to Islam and is now using his fast growing platforms to educate people about Islam as well as his experience as a Muslim American. Canyon is going to help me today answer some of these very rarely visited questions from the perspective of a white American. Thank you again, Kenyon, for joining us on TMJ. Great to have you on. I actually came across one of your more controversial videos, which we will actually get into in a bit. But before I get into the controversy, I wanted to start off with, you briefly walking us through your journey to Islam.
I'll give you the short summary. And yes, you're very correct. Westerners are raised to have a very negative view on Islam. The media tells us it's a very bad religion. Every single major news broadcast channel tells the average American that Islam is the reason there's problems in the world, right? Islam is the reason there's wars in the world. So that is why we see a lot of people not raised as Muslims, not find Islam, earlier in their life, later in their life. It's incredibly rare. I've met maybe 2 other reverts who are from America specifically, so I know it is very rare. And why I was more open to Islam when I was looking into it is because I fell into the very small minority of people who didn't have negative propaganda about the religion. So growing up, I didn't actually know anything about Islam. I grew up in a very small town, very conservative, right? I didn't grow up watching TV. My parents were very, you could say hippie if you wanted to use the word, but they were very like, no technology, no plastic. So I didn't get any propaganda at a young age. So I was very open to the religion. And then I started traveling around the world. I lived in Pakistan for a little bit. While I was in Pakistan, I met a lot of Muslims who were such kind people. They were so genuine. And it really intrigued me. I'm like, why are they so nice? So I looked in, it was their religion. And I got very intrigued by it. I started to research the religion of Islam. And because I didn't have any negative opinions prior, I was able to see the truth, right? I was able to see, okay, what actually is this without the media giving me an opinion? And it made complete sense. The religion was very logical. I started to feel a connection. I was praying in the mosque before I was a Muslim. I started to feel a connection to the religion. And then one thing led to another, and I took my Shahada while I was living in Pakistan.
So really, you would say when you traveled, it opened your eyes more. And it's interesting to me because I know, and you say you were raised in a conservative family. One of the kind of viewpoints that's largely attributed to conservatives in America is viewing Islam as this hostile religion that wants to come over. And we hear this, phrase Sharia law, and, Muslims want to come impose their, thoughts and their views and their faith on others. So growing up, you didn't hear anything negative about Islam. Is that what I'm hearing?
If you were to take me at 17 years old and go, Canyon, tell me what a Muslim is, I wouldn't know, right? Because in America, the only time you learn what Muslims are or what Islam is from large news sources and newspapers spreading propaganda. They don't teach Islam in school. You never once learn anything about Arab. You never learn about the Arab nations. You never learn about Islam. We learn everything about the Crusades. We learn everything about Christianity, but never once in our school system do we learn about Islam. So if you're not getting information from friends, family, or the media, you'll know nothing. So I actually
And so
like, yeah, knew
you
nothing.
also didn't have like classmates who were Muslim or any of that?
No, no, there's not a. I am the only Muslim from my hometown. I'm still in contact with a lot of my friends who I went to high school with, a lot of people I knew when I was younger, and I haven't like got any messages like, "Oh my gosh, Canyon's radicalized. He's a Muslim, right? Like, what happened to him?" They just don't know anything, right? So this
Right.
new generation, the people who are between 15 and 25, they didn't get raised with the 9/11 propaganda, so they don't know the negative connotations. They just know nothing, and that's why we're in a perfect time to educate these people, right? So my friends, they're like, "Oh, what's a Muslim?" I'm back in my hometown right now visiting my family, and I went out and got dinner with a friend, and he's like, "Aren't you like religious now?" Like that's what he said. He didn't know anything else, right? So they're just very uneducated.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point because the younger population in America is increasingly affiliating themselves with no religion at all. So even though still the statistics are showing that a lot of, young white Americans are saying they're Christian, but the religiously unaffiliated group is also very highly increasing, which also becomes an interesting conversation because many, and we're going to get into this next, the kind of rhetoric that surrounds anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-Islam kind of conversations in the US, lots of it is actually coming from the older generation and does not include a lot of what the younger generation is now going through. Do you think that, people like yourself, the experience that you've had not being exposed to Islam is something that a majority of young people in this country are experiencing, or is that just something that you would say is a you thing?
I would say that was a me thing because of how I was raised when we weren't huge on social media. Now, kids being raised how they are, everybody grows up on social media. I think the average American now does know while they're raised what Muslims are. I think they know more of the truth. We're now in, as much as there is still censorship and people who run the media, we're in the most decentralized media has ever been. So I think we've never once had a time in history where Islam is actually starting to be painted more in positive light. Like people are even like conservative broadcasters, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, people who would claim to be on the right, people who would claim to be conservative, coming out and going, wait, maybe what's going on in these Muslim countries isn't true, right? Maybe Sharia law isn't that bad. Maybe Muslims aren't that bad. So I think the entire world is waking up. I think we're having a bigger shift. We're seeing this people from every single ethnicity, people from every single background, they're reverting. It's like my father's a great example. My father is 51 years old. He's not a Muslim, but he's super receptive to having these type of conversations, right? He was telling me the other day, he's like, yeah, I was looking up like what jihad means, right? He's like, and it seems pretty good. He's like, nothing really seems bad about that, right? So it's like the previous generations, when they controlled 100% of the media, could go jihad, jihad, war, 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 Muslims are horrible. But now that we have ChatGPT and can look up and go, does Islam condone war? And ChatGPT goes, no, right? Like people are starting to wake up and see the truth. So I think we're going to have an entire shift where these new generations won't even think as much negative about Islam. I'll give you one quick anecdote on this. Saudi
Mm-hmm.
Arabia. People 20 years ago, oh, Saudi, right? Super dangerous place. And yes, the older people still think this. But anybody who's like has an ounce of intelligence knows Saudi is like one of the most prospering societies in the world right now. Right? Knows it's one of the safest places. Like Riyadh specifically, it's one of the cleanest cities. It's one of the safest countries, happiest citizens. So I think the people are waking up.
I do agree with you that there has been a lot more of, these conversations being had and people looking at it from a different lens. What also exists, and I'm going to bring up a recent example because a lot of people are talking about it. Charlie Kirk's death especially brought to surface a lot of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant rhetoric. Not because, and it's comical because even though the perpetrator was not even Muslim, this just happens every time. It's like Muslims just have to be dragged into the conversation anyway. But it's partly because Charlie Kirk himself didn't really have great things to say about Islam in America, about Prophet Muhammad, about lots of things that related to what it means to be Muslim. Now, the reason I bring this up is, as you're saying, there's one side that is very much open to this. There's another side, which, and this is growing, and I believe it has a lot to do with what kinds of, think tanks and what kinds of groups are being financed heavily to put out this kind of rhetoric. This idea that, Islam is hostile to Western civilization. That also exists. And even though I do agree people are thinking more, but I do think with a lot of events that are coming up, this idea is also something a lot of people do believe in. But why do you think Islam here has been painted as the issue?
There's some very interesting things. I can explain perfectly why why America doesn't want Islam to grow. Okay. Why is it that every poor Muslim country, which has no natural minerals or no natural resources or oils, were always the Muslim countries who didn't need democracy? Why was it only the Muslim countries that had a bunch of oil and a bunch of metals and a bunch of resources that needed democracy, right? It's very interesting. Now, when you have the two largest religions in the world, which are Christianity and Islam, what's the easiest way to control the masses of the world? To make people fight each other, right? Christians aren't the ones who rule the world. Muslims aren't the ones who rule the world. We can all read between the lines and know who rules the world. Now, what's the best way to keep control of large societies? Have them fight each other. So paint one side negatively, paint Muslims negatively. Christians now hate Muslims. Americans now hate Muslims. They fight against each other. Nobody pays attention to the major issues going on in the world right now. There are groups of ethnicities that are being cleansed by other groups and killed and wiped out, and people talk more about the issues between Muslims and Christians than they talk about this, right? And you talk about, okay, so why choose Islam as the one to paint negatively? Why not Christianity, right? Why do they want to silence Islam and not Christianity? The reason they want to silence Islam is because Islam is the only religion that doesn't conform to society. They've gotten Christianity to conform to society. All Christians in America are lukewarm Christians who do not practice their religion, right? But they can't get Islam to conform because Islam has clear-cut rules that don't change, right? When they need Christians to conform, they just go, hey, update the Bible for the 400,000th time. Put this new verse in, right? So we can now pass this law. They can't do that with Muslims because we're like, this is the rule, right? Your democracy is not going to change our Sharia. We don't need your new system. We don't need your new leadership. We have a system that works, and the system that works in Islam doesn't allow the people who control the world to have the influence they want, right? Christianity doesn't have a clear system people can follow. The Christianity doesn't have a Sharia, but Islam does. And that's why they have to paint Islam as the negative light. Because if Islam grew, which it is, and became too powerful, which has already started to happen, they wouldn't be able to control it. They wouldn't be able to stop it.
And I think you mentioned, and this is a really important conversation as well, that you're saying most Christians in America are practicing this lukewarm Christianity. I would say, and I think this is something you could have a lot of insight on, one common thing that's said alongside that argument is we want, America to go back to being a white Christian nation. That's another thing that comes up very frequently. Another conversation that comes up, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, is when people come into America, the right thing to do is to assimilate to American values, to Western values. And my immediate question is, and no one has ever been able to answer this in a way that makes sense, but I always ask, what are Western values? Because if I were to walk into America not knowing anything about anyone here, and someone says, all right, this is America, we have Western values, we have American values, and you got to assimilate into it because social cohesion is important or whatever. Do I assimilate to the left or do I assimilate to the right? Liberal, values or conservative values? If it's an argument about being a white Christian nation, what are Christian values? Because I will drive by one church here and it'll have a pride flag. Another church won't. And even within Christianity now, especially the younger generation, is starting to interpret the entire religion in a very different way than their, parents and grandparents were. So if you were to explain, how would you answer the question, what Western values really mean?
So let's start by asking a question. First, we have to ask Christians, how can you possibly think that your religion is the truth if you cannot agree on what the truth is amongst your denominations, right? Christianity has 45,000 different denominations that heavily contradict each other, right? The Catholic belief and the Orthodox belief and the Baptist belief have very contradictory belief. They're three different religions. They all fall under Christianity, but they're completely different, right? So then we go, okay, well, what are Christian values? Well, then we have to decide, are we taking Christian values from which of the 45,000 different denominations of Christianity? Right? If you go to 10 different churches in America and you ask 10 different pastors, can you explain what Christianity is? You're going to get 10 different answers. If you go to 10 mosques in 10 different countries and you ask, can you explain what Islam is? You are going to get the exact same answer 10 times, right? So there is no such thing as Western values. Western values are the signs of end of times. Western values are people wearing clothes but being naked. It's where music is everywhere, right? It's where drunkenness is everywhere. Like these are the signs of the end of times. That's Western values. There's no such thing as Western values. So they say Muslims are dangerous, right? Because we go and invade the world. Yeah, that makes sense. Muslims are the ones invading the world. Wait, no, that's America. What country right now is an Islamic nation invading? How many is America invading? Right? There is no such thing as Western values. There are European values. You could say there's European values, but Western values. What is Western values? America is a melting pot of people who came over 300 years ago. America's 300 years old. It's not even a Christian nation, right? We built America with separation of church and state, where we have church and then actual government are not together, right? It's not like Sharia. It's not like where you have religion and government intertwined. But then we have these Republicans and Democrats as well, but mostly Republicans who go, we need this white Christian nation. And where this comes from is they are so emotionally attached to their religion with zero facts and it's all emotion. Because what happens when you're raised in a religion like Christianity, you're taught to believe something, not because you believe it's the truth, but because someone else told you it's the truth, right? So that's why I believe everyone, regardless of your religion, you need to sit down and go, do I actually believe this? Or did someone tell me I should believe this? Okay? Because what should real Western values be? What does Western mean? It means people from the West. So it means the values are going to be whatever changes. It's not a concrete value. You can have biblical values. That's very different. And then you're going to get very similar values to Islam. And they can't wrap their head around this, right? They say, we need the white Christian values. Oh, wait, the white Christian values are 95% the same as the brown Muslim values, right? It's the same. What's the second commandment from Jesus? Love thy neighbor.
So you would say they're, a lot more similar, and it is true. Islam and Christianity in many respects are very similar. But my question is, and I thought about this while you were answering the question. I mean, you were raised here. You're very much aware of, what cultural Western values could be referred to in this situation. Do you ever feel conflicted about the culture you grew up in and now the religion that you have accepted?
Absolutely not. Islam did not come around to get rid of culture. It came around to correct religion and bring us back to the truth, right? So a lot of reverts go through an identity crisis. They become a Muslim. They think they have to change their name. They have to start dressing like a Muslim. There's no such thing as dressing like a Muslim, right? They call it Arabization, right? Where people think that Islam is somehow an Arab religion. It's not. Arabs make up 20% of Muslims. So first we have to understand a couple things. Islam has nothing to do with your culture or your ethnicity or your upbringing. If you want to wear a three-piece suit and nice polished shoes, you're still a Muslim. If you want to live in Hawaii and be a surfer, you are still a Muslim. If you want to be a NASCAR driver who lives in America, you're still a Muslim. If you want to go study in Medina and wear thobes, you're still a Muslim, right? So I at first did have, I wouldn't say it was the identity crisis, but I did swing to where culture impacts us, because we're still at a stage in Islam where the majority of the day-to-day practices that aren't necessarily Islamic come from the Arab cultures, right? Like thobes, for example. That actually has nothing to do with Islam. There could be the modesty aspect, but the thobe specifically.
It's culture. A lot of it is culture, yeah.
Because they're comfortable. But it's just, but it's a very important message we have to get to reverts is you don't have to change every single aspect of you to be a Muslim, right? You're still you, you're just now a Muslim. Now, what you can't do is you can't then go, oh, well, I'm a Muslim, but I'm still going to go celebrate Christmas, right? No. If culture goes against Islam, that's then when Islam wipes out culture. But you can still have your culture. You can still have your European culture, your American culture, whatever that is, right? You can still have your Asian culture and still be a Muslim.
And on the topic of religious principles, I'm going to get into one of the most controversial posts that you had, which was the first thing that I actually saw from you, is on your Instagram page, you had said that you believe Sharia law. And before I get into that, I think there's another prerequisite conversation that's really important. But you basically said Sharia law would be better for America than the current democracy or so-called democracy that we have. Before you became Muslim, what was your view about what Sharia law even means? Had you ever heard that before? Because it's a rhetoric that's thrown around very conveniently, and half the people who use it don't even know what it means. But did you have any exposure to that before becoming Muslim?
The average American is raised to think Sharia law means barbaric law, right? Americans are told a place that has Sharia law means influence, men only control the entire place. Women don't have a single say. Women are oppressed. They have war, right? They kill children. You're allowed to have slaves. Like, that's what they think Sharia is. And that's because the average person who hates Islam has decided to pluck verses with zero context and then paint that as that's what Sharia is. I want to give some context before I give the main point. So a lot of people say that go kill the polytheists and the non-believers. They quote that from our Quran. That's authentic. That's what it says. But then what they do is they negate the 5 verses above it, where it says, this is talking about when the polytheists break the peace treaty you had. When they break it, then you can go kill them. And then they disregard the verse right underneath it, where it says, then if they ask for peace, you have to give them peace, right? So yes, as Americans, we were raised to think Sharia is horrible. And that's because paint Muslims as the bad people, then we can go give Muslims democracy and take all their oil.
When you did make that post, and I'm guessing you definitely had a change of, heart and understanding about what Sharia even means. Because when it really comes down to it, Sharia is just an Islamic code of conduct. Why do you think that Sharia is a better option for America than what we have here?
First, I'll ask you a question. You're a Muslim. Do you feel oppressed by your religion?
I don't, no.
And that's the funny thing. Every single person who says, oh, Sharia oppresses women, have never talked to a Muslim woman, right? So I'll go, no, Sharia is good for women. It liberates them. Islam was the first religion that came and actually protected women. And then it's a bunch of non-Muslim women going, no, it's bad for them, blah, blah, blah. And then it's a bunch of Muslims going, no, I like my religion. It's good, right? So first we have to understand, you cannot hold an opinion on something that you have not experienced. So people say, when I go, Sharia is better than democracy. Okay, go live in a Muslim country. I do. Okay, go visit the Muslim countries. I've lived in 6. Okay? I'm speaking from firsthand experience seeing these Muslim countries. So why is Sharia law better than democracy? What is democracy right now? A judicial system that puts criminals into a system, puts dangerous criminals back out on the street, causing violent crimes. A democracy is where we have school shootings every single week. A democracy is where people get killed left and right, and the people who kill them have 0 consequences. A democracy is where we're allowed to have alcohol. You can go drink and drive. 273,000 people die every single year from drunk driving. You know how many people get abused because their husband is an alcoholic? That's what democracy allows. Democracy allows political systems where the average person thinks that they have a say, where they have influence, but they don't. And governments run the entire world and we don't have a single say. A democracy is where they can change the laws to benefit certain classes of humans and not benefit the rest. Sharia is a system that makes equality between every single citizen, whether they're rich, poor, disability, men, women, whatever it is. Sharia law teaches ethics. And I say Sharia law so Americans understand. Sharia law means law. Sharia is law, right? It's not some crazy foreign concept. But Sharia teaches us how to be good people. It teaches us how to have the correct punishments for crimes, right? So people will say, Sharia law is bad because it says you can kill someone if they murdered someone. Okay, let's look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has one of the lowest crime rates, if not the lowest crime rate in the entire world, and they do practice certain aspects of Sharia. Nobody does it perfectly, but where there are severe consequences if you do severe crimes. And people say, oh, well, that's really bad. That's really bad. What do you mean it's bad if we're going to kill someone who went and murdered a whole family? That's consequences, right? And when you have hard, real consequences, that's how you stop people from committing crimes. But if you're in America with the current democracy, where someone knows, I can go do this crime, they'll put me in prison for 5 years, they'll put me back out, I'm going to get fed, I'm going to get taken care of, like it doesn't matter. The American taxpaying dollars will pay for this felon, right? That doesn't make any sense. So the democracy system has failed. It is not successful. People think it's successful, but that's because the average American is psyoped. But when you follow something like Sharia, your cities will be safer, your people will be happier, your women will be more protected, your families will be more nucleus, right? Better family dynamics, and your city will prosper. Every single city who truly lives by Sharia prospers. But here's the thing. Right after I say this, people are then going to go, oh, well, go look at Afghanistan. They don't follow Sharia in certain places in Afghanistan. They don't, okay? What a small minority of Muslims do does not represent Islam or represent Sharia. Now, really fascinating thing, go look up Muslim countries before and after democracy, when they did follow Sharia, before America bombed them. How prosperous were they? They were very prosperous.
A few points to what you're saying, and I think you brought up very interesting points. It's definitely true that you cannot judge an entire religion based on how a country is practicing it. Now, you asked me, for example, do you believe that your religion oppresses you? A lot of people don't know. And this just goes to the ignorance of just hearing something and accepting it, including some Muslims as well. So I have to be fair, a lot of Muslims might not even know this, but Islam came on the topic of women's rights because that's often brought up when it comes to, oppression and this idea that women who cover in Islam are oppressed. Islam in the 7th century, before, the Byzantine and Persian empires, before Europe, which only gave women the right to vote even centuries later, pre-Islamic Arabia, which is a different conversation. But Islam from the get-go gave women these rights that at their time was revolutionary in the world. So, things like at a time when women in Europe even were treated as property, Muslim women could own property. They had the right to inheritance. They had the right to consent in marriage at a time when a lot of women were just, being forced to get married. They have a right to divorce, financial independence, education. They had a process of consultation where even the Prophet himself would actively consult with women when making decisions about society. So modern democracies have only recently recognized women even as full citizens, let alone as someone who should not be considered property. And this is a fact that is very much buried under the surface because it's so much more convenient to repeat these narratives. So another question I think that comes up in this conversation is, how do you reverse this? Because it's almost as if there is absolutely no interest in hearing the other side. It's like, oh, you're just saying that because you want to defend your religion and justify the fact that you guys are this way or that way. Why is there such an unwillingness to even have these conversations?
If Muslims want to break the stigma of how the Western world looks at us, we are not going to do this by preaching our religion. We're not going to do this by convincing them. What does Allah tell us, right? It's not the eyes that are blind, it's the heart. It's not the ears that are blind, it's the heart. So us preaching them is never going to change them. You can sit down with a Christian and tell them every single thing about why Islam is not bad and why Christianity is false, and it will not resonate with them. What we have to do is we need to set the best example of humans, because what's going to happen then is the better Muslims become, the more they become integrated into the entire world, the more non-Muslims will meet them, and they'll go, wow, they're not that bad. I'll give you an example. The number one reason why I became a Muslim was because I met a bunch of Muslims in Pakistan, and I was like, wow, these people are pretty chill. These people are really cool. I like them. So I built positive connotations with Islam. And then when I reverted and I took my Shahada, I told my mom, and she had 2 people in her life immediately that went, oh, wow, Muslims are really cool. A doctor who she worked with, who went and traveled some Muslim countries, a Christian man who lives in America, but he met a bunch of Muslims. He didn't listen to them online. He met a bunch of Muslims, and they're like, and he's like, yeah, Muslims are really cool people. And then my grandparents, they're Mormon grandparents. They've traveled around the entire world. They love that I'm Muslim. They love Muslims because they've met Muslims, right? So we won't break the stigma by preaching. We can preach, and it's needed. It's part of it, right? But the true stigma will break by people meeting Muslims. For example, I met all of my friends from high school just like a couple weeks ago. We went out to dinner. There was about 6 of us. I was the first Muslim they've ever met. Those people would never have met a Muslim. So now they've all got a positive connotation with Muslims. They're nothing extreme. He just doesn't drink and doesn't smoke and doesn't do bad things, right? Seems like a cool dude. Now that's going to keep happening. As Islam grows, there'll be more Muslims who meet non-Muslims for the first time, And as the generations grow, one after another, people will start to associate more positive connotations with Muslims. Now, the only reason that this won't work is if Muslims let the conflict get to us, which I have to work on this very much. We cannot let the hate get to us. The moment we let the hate get to us and we retaliate with hate is the moment we have failed. It's not about turn the other cheek. No, if someone walks in my house, attacks my family, I'm going to attack them back. But it's about not attacking them first, not going out of the way to attack them. I say this very commonly. This is one of my sayings. The best form of dawah is not by preaching at the top of your lungs. It's by being the best Muslim you can possibly be. Because you never know when you're going to meet a non-Muslim and you're going to be the very first Muslim they've ever met, and they're going to associate all of your kindness, all of your goodness with Islam.
I do think that a lot of the reason why many here in America do have this perception about Muslims is because they haven't been in contact with enough of them. I don't know if you've seen those like travel vlogs where like a white person goes to a country like Iran and immediately his vlog blows up because people are so interested in this idea of, and it always starts like this. It's like, oh, I was told by everyone that Iran is an absolute hellhole to go to, but guess what? I went and what I saw surprised me. It always starts off like that because people genuinely love this idea of, this apparent clash of civilizations. And all of them, almost without exception, are going and having the time of their life. And that to me speaks a lot because I watch these vlogs myself because I think it's so interesting that people are so, living, for some people, living really under a rock, where someone who goes to another country like that, for them, it's like, oh my goodness, this is just insane. How are you going to Iran and you're not getting, killed? So I want to know from your perspective, from the younger generation. And I think I'm going to kind of close the conversation on the younger generation because I do think they are the rising generation. A lot of what they are thinking is going to become what society will look like moving forward. A lot of young Americans are facing a crisis of identity. And, in a social paradigm that really has no such thing as an objective morality, which is another problem, in my opinion, about Western values, is there is no such thing as an objective moral system. It's whatever I think is moral is right. And that's, I think, a part of the reason why we do see a lot of social ills coming out within these same Western countries. Very basic examples being, the overuse of sexually explicit videos, the increasing OnlyFans presence of especially women creators going on these platforms. I think that says a lot about how society views this idea of freedom and morality and things like dignity. What are your views on what that means for the younger generation right now? How are they making sense of, all of this?
It's a sign of the end of times. 1 in 50 women in America will end up selling their body online. And that's a very sad and disgusting fact. And if you think that's normal, if you think that's liberating, you need to sit down and have a long, deep thought on how you want your future children to be raised. If you're a 20-year-old man right now and you go, oh, it's fine if women want to be on OnlyFans or do whatever, how would you feel if that was your daughter? How would you feel if you knew that's what your son was watching? How would you feel if that's what you knew your son thought about women? That's how he viewed them. Would you still feel the same? Sometimes we have to take ourselves out of our shoes to truly see things from the correct light, right? Because when we're caught up in our life, it's very easy to not think about these things because it's so chaotic, our life. There's so much noise. So if you think it's fine for people to go out and drink and it's fine to have hookup culture, just ask yourself, how would you want your son to be raised? How would you want your daughter to be raised? How would you want men to view your daughter? How would you like women to view your son? And I think asking those questions, you'll get yourself the answer. And I want to touch briefly on polygamy because this is really important. Western society says, oh, polygamy is so bad. These Muslim men who are just want to fulfill their sexual desires and have a bunch of wives. Okay, you literally have hookup culture in America where people will swipe on Tinder, meet up with someone they do not know, have intercourse with this person, have zero shame with them, and never talk to them again. You have a society where people have 3 girlfriends and 1 dog and 1 plant and 1 chair that are in the relationship. And all of a sudden that's liberating, that's amazing. But as soon as a Muslim man wants 2 wives, and he must take care of them both equally, provide for them, support them, right? Give them the life they want. All of a sudden, that becomes bad.
Do you think a majority of people your age, I'm guessing early 20s, do you think a majority of them would agree with you? Or do you think that this culture is so ingrained and normalized within, America that it's almost as if it's not even a question?
The average person wants to agree with me, but they can't because of social norms. The reason why society is failing is because the average person now lacks the ability to hold their own opinion and stand by it. We all have groupthink, where I'm just going to subject my opinions to what the masses think. I don't want to spend the conscious energy to decide what I believe and what I think is important, what I want in my life. I'll just let the political party that I align myself with decide. I'll just let the religious belief that I align with decide. Like, you have to sit down and critically ask yourself. And I seriously think, objectively, any of the stuff that we've covered, nobody truly disagrees with. Deep down in their heart, nobody disagrees with Sharia law. Deep down in their heart, nobody really disagrees with how Islam has structured polygamy. Deep down, nobody disagrees with the teachings of Islam. But they have so much societal programming and pressure that tells them they have to disagree. So I would say people want to agree, but society won't let them.
And do you see this trend changing? So again, I focused it on the younger generation because it's a little bit difficult when you have someone from the older generation, like maybe above 50s. It's a little bit more difficult for you to change your mind on things that you have spent your whole life trying to solidify and, make sense of. Your worldview, really. And obviously your society and the media and your immediate circle and family and friends have a huge impact. But do you think the younger generation, which I do think is much more impressionable, and I do believe they are also grappling with a lot of these same questions and conversations that you and I are having right now and try to make sense of, okay, what is the right way?
I made a video the other day. I said, I predict that America will become a Muslim country. I wholeheartedly believe this. Over a long enough time horizon, America will be a Muslim country. It won't become a Muslim country because of people immigrating there who are already Muslims. It won't become a Muslim country through people forcing people to take their Shahada. It will become a Muslim country by the vast majority of people just waking up, just like I did. I'm an antidote of it. There will just be millions more of canyons. That's what's going to happen. Because the younger generation has never been so receptive to Islam. And the best part, this is the best part. The reason why I think Islam is going to grow so much is because the younger generation no longer believes the media. The average 20-year-old doesn't believe a single thing the media tells them, right? They're like, I know the media is lying to me. I know I can't trust the media. So if the media is telling me Muslims are horrible people, I'm not going to believe that. And that's just going to lead more people to looking into the religion. The more people are looking into the religion, and because they don't believe the media, they're going to have no negative opinions on Islam. They're going to have an objective view. And anybody, absolutely anybody, who reads the Quran with an objective view, like not trying to find their belief in it just by reading it for what it is, will realize Islam is the truth. Like, it's a perfect religion. You cannot prove it wrong. Like, 100%. Give it 50 more years, and the amount of Muslims to Christians will be disproportionate.
Well, I think that's a little bit of a stretch because Muslims are currently 1% of the American population, and estimates are saying that by 2050 they might be closer to 2%. I would say though, your experience is not the average experience of most people. It does stand out. Another aspect, and I want to know your opinion about this, a lot of young people right now, as they get closer to adolescent age and college age and whatnot, because of the nature of just growing up and being in just being surrounded by things related to giving into, let's say, urges like partying and drinking and things that people are taught and young people are taught from a young age are just how to have fun. That, to even Muslims, by the way, this isn't just a problem that non-Muslims have. Even Muslim youth growing up in this society, when they get to that age, they do struggle with these. They struggle with having the right friends, not having a girlfriend, let's say, saving themselves for marriage, if you will, not partying, not drinking, not getting into a lot of the stuff that is very normalized in Western society. So this is a real struggle. Do you think young people really will gravitate to a religion like Islam if it's not in their immediate interest to go after it?
100%. And I stand by wholeheartedly my statement on America becoming a Muslim country. Like it will over a long enough time horizon. because the tide is turning so dramatically. Life is like pendulums, right? Think about how much society has changed in the last 4 years. Think about how the average person views Islam or the media on Islam now versus 4 years ago. And we've got this now culture where we've been so far on degeneracy for a long time, where the youth, regardless of religion, is starting to fight against that, right? The youth is starting to get into discipline. We're having higher rates ever of people getting into the gym, right? We're having very high rates of people no longer actually wanting hookup culture, people wanting genuine relationships. We're having online social media. People no longer want this fake facade from influencers. They want genuine connections with people. So we're having this shift in society of people wanting to go more back to the traditional values outside of religion. We're having more people want to go back to how we did things a couple hundred years ago. And then what's going to happen, the more people swing back to that, the more people who will look into Islam. Think about if were a Muslim raised in America right after 9/11, your experience as a Muslim then versus now in America. Now we have entire Muslim populations. I was just in Texas visiting some friends. I feel like I was in Pakistan. I didn't actually feel any like negative degeneracy. I was like, it was just a Muslim community. It was a Muslim hub where I was, right? The mosque, like all of the halal food. And that didn't exist heavily 20 years ago. So I think that the tides are going to shift more and more and more. People are growing up with Muslims in their school, right? People are growing up with their friends having Muslim parents. And this didn't really exist in America 20, 30 years ago. It was such a small percentage.
You say you went to Texas and you saw so many Muslims. That's something that conservatives a lot of times will say that's our exact issue. Why should we be in America and see so many Muslims in our state? We should see white people. Like, this is America. Why are so many Muslims and immigrants around? So this way of thinking does exist, and to some extent it is growing. So my question is, how do you see this alongside your view that younger people as well as the general American population will also gravitate more toward, let's say, Islamic values? How would you put these two realities together?
I have a very good answer to this. So, Islamophobes hate Islam because the media and because a small percentage of Muslims false represent Islam, right? So they say, oh, because ISIS does this, that's all of Muslims. That's the same thing as us going, oh, because KKK does that, that's all of Christians, which is simply not true. And that's actually the same with people who hate Muslims. I get death threats every single day. Have I ever met someone in person who it was a very negative experience? No, I actually met someone in Texas who didn't really like Muslims. He was kind of racist, but he was still like a chill dude. Like he was still like, he's like, yeah, I don't really like you
But it's
guys.
also because you are white. So people
But
wouldn't
I
off the
was with
bat guess that you're Muslim. Yeah.
but I was with a bunch of brown people, right? So the guy, he was pretty vocal about it. He's like, I don't really like you guys. But he's just like there. He was pretty chill. Like he didn't, nothing went past that, right? Like it wasn't like
Right.
death threats or anything. So what we have to also understand is we're in a place right now where social media amplifies the extreme, right? The extremes of
Absolutely.
conservatives who hate Muslims and want Muslims to go back to their country. That is such a small percentage of conservatives. The majority of conservatives go, you do your thing, I'm going to do my thing, right? I don't want you to change our culture, but I'm not like, you do what you want, right? The conservative belief is like kind of every man for themselves, right? Like it's
Right.
we do my thing. So yes, there are some conservatives who hate Muslims and want us to go out, but the vast majority of Americans don't actually hate Muslims. It's a small percentage that gets over amplified by the media, and we just have to distinct that. We need to know the difference between it.
Well, thank you so much, Candon. And I actually want to end this question. I know we talked a lot of politics, a lot of, controversy, but I want to end on a positive note. And I'm very interested to know, many Muslims find a lot of meaning and solace through like the Quran, obviously community, charity, a lot of things that are really emphasized within the religion. For you as a Muslim, what aspect of your faith has been personally the most meaningful and, beautiful for you?
Growing in faith with good brothers or sisters is the best thing that you can do as a Muslim, right? If you're a woman, get around other good women who are good, practicing, genuine Muslims and grow together. If you're a man, get around good, practicing men and grow together. There's something about that positive accountability of being a better Muslim that will increase your faith more than anything. In my opinion, surrounding yourself with good Muslims is gonna make you a better Muslim more than reading the Quran, more than reading the Hadiths, more than going and listening to, Jummah talk, whatever it is. When you are surrounded by the right type of Muslims and you talk about the Hadiths and you talk about the Quran and you talk about the miracles and you all hold each other accountable to be a better Muslim, you will just walk away from those situations with such high iman. This is what it was like in Texas. I was with a couple of my Muslim friends. There's about 4 of us. And like we'd be up like all night, like talking about different hadiths. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I felt so connected to my creator and my faith at that time more than any other thing I've done. And that's what I'd recommend to anybody, and especially people who have been either out of the fold of Islam or new reverts. The best thing you can do, go surround yourself with the right people.
Well, thank you so much, Canyon. I think that was a really, really beautiful way to end this conversation. I really appreciate having you on, and I hope to have you back on again soon.
Inshallah. Thank you for the conversation.
If you like what you see here at TMJ News, please like and share, and definitely subscribe to our channel for more weekly interviews and content. TMJ News is a grassroots independent media outlet, and you can find ways to support us by reading the caption below. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you liked this episode.